Does size matter when it comes to mesenchymal stem cells? That's what we're going to talk about here today, Dream Body Clinic. I'm Josh, and recently I was asked by a potential patient about a video they had seen online. There's this doctor there on YouTube talking about how his mesenchymal stem cells are the best because they're the smallest, and you need the smallest mesenchymal stem cells to get past the blood-brain barrier and help the most with neurodegenerative issues or stroke or different things. And I found that interesting because first, the cell size, there's an average range, and it doesn't matter how you cultivate, what you do, there's no special way to get smaller cells. So I thought that was kind of funny, but I wanted to make sure I got a really accurate answer on this. So I went and talked to our head biologist. He's got his PhD in cellular biology, and I asked him, and he came back and he said a few things. He goes, look, it's a really interesting question, but it's a bit more complex than that because the space between the blood-brain barrier, it's not measured in microns. And this guy was trying to say, oh, well, our cells need to be, 30 microns large and this and that. And yes, microns do measure cell size, but the blood-brain barrier is not measured in microns. So right there was already an issue. In fact, you're measuring that in Daltons, which typically around 400 to 600 Daltons for the blood-brain barrier. And we'll get a bit more into that. But I find it interesting because an IV was the way this guy was saying to go. Well, when you do an IV, it goes to the heart and the lungs. The lungs act as a bit of a filter. In fact, the studies are showing the majority of those cells are going to get stuck there for 1 to 3 hours in the lungs. A lot will permeate through, get into lungs and help, and a lot will just wait until they get through and then go through the rest of the system. This is what we're finding from the newer studies. So it's not the most efficient route to the brain because the brain is the last stop. You're going to go heart, lungs, liver, kidney, spleen, all these different organs before it gets there to the brain. So it's the last pass, and then it's got to get through the blood-brain barrier. So we just say, hey, let's bypass that altogether. We do an intrathecal treatment where we go into the spinal cord fluid. We are able to inject in there, and that allows the cells via this intrathecal treatment where the cells go up to the brain, go up the cerebral spine or the spinal cord fluid to the cerebral spinal fluid, and they can get in there directly to the brain and start doing their job right. So he pointed out a few other things that I thought were pretty interesting, and I'm just going to kind of read through this because it's pretty technical. Hopefully it'll make sense for you. But he said, first, the blood-brain barrier, it's a selective permeability barrier that protects the brain from harmful substances. While allowing essential nutrients to pass through, it primarily restricts the passage of large molecules and pathogens, typically around 400 to 600 Daltons, rather than measuring in microns. So Daltons, you're measuring molecular mass, right? And through extensive studies, research have found that compounds that are fat-soluble or very small in size, such as alcohol and certain low molecular weight narcotics or hormones below 400 to 600 Daltons, can easily pass through the blood-brain barrier. So this is where you start hearing people talk about exosomes. Mesenchymal stem cells will work by releasing exosomes. So we're still not sure. Do they get through the IV to the blood-brain barrier and then release their exosomes, which pass through because those are small enough to get through? Or do the cells kind of get oblong and, get through? Because pathogens do still get through the blood-brain barrier. Other things do. And that's why you can't measure it just in Daltons. There's different ways for these things to get through. And stem cells, like a mouse going under a door, can slip through. So the whole mechanism process, what's working best, we're not sure. So when we do an IV, we actually add 10 milligrams of melatonin and DMSO. These actually help break down the permeability of the blood-brain barrier, make it a bit easier to sneak things through. So that does that for about 30 minutes. So we believe because of that, we get more to the brain. That's one thing that we do. So again, we're not worrying about the size because there's an average size from mesenchymal stem cells. We'll get that to a minute, but it doesn't, I hate that people are always arguing these little details, right? Oh, my cells are smaller than theirs, or mine are this and that. And there's so much marketing going on that it gets pretty ridiculous. So I'm going to post this whole thing from our head biologist so you can read through it if you want to get into the technical details. But a few more points that he gets into were that was that, they've done a lot of studies. I mean, if you go to clinicaltrials.gov, which is the US-based website for a lot of these trials, I mean, there's 249 clinical studies on neurodegenerative diseases, nervous system diseases with mesenchymal stem cells. And of those, 96 alone are just on stroke. And in fact, they found with stroke recovery, the best way to go is intrathecal. So we already know the best route. There's intravenous. There's been 48 studies on that. Intrathecal, there's 8 studies on that. Intravenous with intrathecal combo, there's 3. Then there's intraventricular, intrastriatal, intracerebral, nasal, and not indicated. So there's only like one of those others each for intrastriatal, intracerebral, nasal. Not a lot of research on that side of it because they found that intrathecal is the best way to get there. The IV is not. So there's a lot of different ways this works. So the main mechanisms exerted by MSCs that contribute to their potential effectiveness lie in important neuroprotective effect, since they secrete growth factors, among which vascular endothelial growth factor, VEGF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF, and nerve growth factor, NGF, as well as anti-apoptotic factors such as BCL-2. These factors allow MSCs to promote nerve regeneration, inhibit neuronal apoptosis, and induce endogenous neurogenesis, new brain cells. You want these things. You want new neovascularization, neurogenesis. You want to promote nerve regeneration, neuronal apoptosis. Cell death is apoptosis. You want to inhibit that, which they do. So we're hitting it from a lot of these different ways. So when you deliver the MSCs, if you can get them to the CNS, central nervous system, it's highly diverse. And though systemic administration, particularly intravenous infusion, is the preferred method according to the studies, there's better ways. And when you do an IV, you've got to remember, they transiently accumulate in the lungs for 1 to 3 hours, followed by a gradual movement to other tissues such as liver, spleen, kidneys, bone marrow. And interesting, the MSCs have shown the ability to reach brain vessels and adhere to them 6 hours post-injection. That was according to Dr. Rooster et al. That's R-U-S-T-E-R with an umlaut on the U. So you can look that up and we'll post the study. So we are finding that they can do these things. There's studies to back it up. The IV even gets them there, but it's not the most effective way. So the point is there's a whole process in this, and the stem cells, it's a multi-step cascade of MSCs, homing mechanism, which consists of 5 different steps, namely tethering and rolling, activation by cytokines, cell arrest by integrins, transmigration, and migration. So there's a whole process to this. I'll post there's a whole image thing here you can take a look at, a little graph that shows this. But the cells are able to get through. So people trying to promote that, oh, my cells are bigger, mine are smaller, it's ridiculous. So this is from one of the studies, and it goes, the average size of MSCs is usually between 10 to 20 micrometers and depends on the passage, the source of the cells. There's minute differences, but at the end of the day, they all work the same. Dr. Kaplan, the man who named MSCs, would start every conference with an MSC is an MSC is an MSC. At this point, they all work the same way. It's just there's different sources. And there's little advantages. Like if you have an autoimmune disease, you don't want them from your own body because your immune system's already compromised. You want them from a young, healthy donor, like umbilical cord. It's only 9 months old. Wharton jelly from the umbilical cord or placenta. These are 9-month-old tissues. They're the youngest, least exposure to the immune system, and they replicate the fastest. So for what we do, culturing, replicating the cells, that's the best. But in the United States, you're not allowed to culture. So you can take them from umbilical cord, or you can take them from adipose, from a liposuction, or you could take them from a bone marrow aspirate. So you've got options. They're all going to work the same way, but it becomes a numbers game in the end. You want to get the most cells possible, which is what we get by using the youngest, healthiest cells. So like on this study here, again, average size 10 to 20 micrometers, and it's like, this one, first one's 10.9, second 15.7, third is 11.9, fourth is 14.2, fifth 10.5, sixth 8.1, seventh 12.6, and then the seventh or the eighth is 13.3. So again, back to this microns thing, it's not even the same measurements. You're not even in the same realm. So I don't know where people come up with these things. It's like everybody's trying to find some marketing advantage. That's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to give you the best cells possible, making sure from the best source and the best desirable outcome, which is why we keep posting videos of testimonials showing you that these work. So if you want to learn more, we're always happy to answer those questions. We're happy to do the deep dives. I'm going to post this on the site with this video so you can all look at it and take a look, understand it better. And that's what it is. So if you want to learn more about mesenchymal stem cells, you can contact us anytime, toll free at 833-445-9089, or you can check out the website, www.dreambody.clinic. Scroll down on the homepage. All the treatments are listed, links to them with prices, info, studies, everything's there. I'm Josh, happy to help.